and Tech. Today actually we have a holiday for both the Indian Express and the Hindu. So I'm taking the newspaper articles from the last couple of days because these are the important articles that we have to take away. So the session will be extremely short today because of the lack of relevant articles, and I don't want to burden you with additional articles. Now, this article on immunology. Let me explain this from the context of how it is relevant for our exam, the backstory, the present news context, what can we ask for prelims, what can we ask in mains, and how do you understand it despite not being from a medical background or a science background. This is the scope of our discussion. Okay. Now, why are we talking about this topic of immunology? Because the recent context, the current affairs or the event is there is a Nobel Prize awarded. It is not important for us to know the specifics of the names of the people, etc. You can remember if you want, but my agenda here is not to dictate the names because you can see the names for yourselves. Right. So what will be the agenda here? First, let's understand the scientific principles to decode the topic from the lens of UPSC examiner. What would UPSC examiner expect from you? Why are we reading about any science and technology topic? Because we are not doctors, we are not scientists, and as a policy maker, what is the takeaway? This should be the perspective. Clear? Alright. Let's understand the basic principles of immunology. Just like every country has an army and a defense system to safeguard the territory, even our body has an immune system which more or less acts like an army of soldiers which tries to protect bodies from, human bodies from being affected by any diseases. How is this possible? Through the cells that are present in our blood. Okay. Broadly speaking, you have the red blood cells and the white blood cells, RBCs and WBCs. So, whenever okay, RBCs and WBCs, whenever we are talking about the defense system, we are predominantly talking about white blood cells. Okay. So the cells that are responsible for safeguarding a human body from diseases is WBCs. Even within the white blood cells, you have various kinds. And a research on these various kinds of cells is nothing but the study of those cells is nothing but the overall context of immunology. Whatever works to protect human body from external agents, foreign particles, diseases, the study of that together comprises the study of immune system. How is it relevant for policy making? Because you are expected to know the principles that work to work in convergence with the policy makers, whether it is vaccines, whether it is autoimmune diseases, whether it is the research involved in, let's say, any cure. All this, like say for example, even organ transplantation. In all this context, the policy makers should have a nuanced understanding of how our human body works. And it is in this context you will study this. Okay? Simply put, our defense system has different kinds of cells. Within the WBCs, you have B cells and T cells. Okay? If the cells notice one foreign particle and try to attack that foreign particle, that is the job done by B cells. T cells will have a long-term memory that will trigger and summon this B cells to attack this foreign particle. So this is the broad categories of B cell and T cell. Again I am repeating, human body has two kinds of cells, RBCs, WBC. Within the WBC there are two more categories, B cells, T cells. Clear? B cells will directly attack whenever they see a foreign particle. T cells will summon based on their long term memory. They have a longer memory. They will summon this B cells and attack the foreign particle. This is the methodology or the principle through which human body works. What is an autoimmune response? Autoimmune response is your own immune system attacking your body despite not having any foreign particle in your blood. Why is this occurring? It is a disorder, and that is why it is called a autoimmune disorder. In the research involving autoimmune disorders, immunotherapy is a very important concept. Okay? We have seen the concept of vaccine development. How do vaccines work? We have seen COVID, right? COVID vaccine works when a foreign particle, maybe the virus particle, is introduced into your body in a small dose that doesn't impact human functioning. Because of that small dose, our body recognizes that it is a foreign particle, and our body develops a memory for recognizing such kind of virus particles from attacking our body in the future. This is how vaccine development happens. Whenever organs are transplanted, let's say one person's lung is transplanted into another, or heart is transplanted, there is a possibility that the donor is giving it with a good intent, but the recipient body is not accepting it, because there might be a possibility that person who is receiving this organ might treat this external organ like a foreign particle and attack. How do I minimize that effect? That is also within the scope of immunology. And finally, overall idea of health as a state of well-being involves a complete understanding of the different kinds of diseases that impact human body. Within that category, we have, let's say for example, cancer. You have a therapy called CAR T cell therapy, which is one of the most expensive treatments as of now for dealing with cancer. There are two kinds of diseases, communicable, non-communicable. Within non-communicable diseases, you have lifestyle based diseases like diabetes, BP, blood pressure, and cancer is also in one way a lifestyle disease. It is not necessarily occurring in people with bad lifestyle, but bad lifestyle like smoking, excessive smoking can lead to cancer. So that's why it is clubbed under lifestyle diseases. So CAR T cell therapy is one name of a therapy for dealing with cancer. Full form is chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy, but I am not getting into the process because you don't have to know to that extent. In all the steps, you can expect a conceptual question in prelims. Second level, if the government of India comes up with any biotechnology related initiative on any of these parameters, you can expect a prelims question there. Third, if there is any international development on biotechnology, let's say for example you have this Yescarta therapy or CAR T cell therapy, which is usually taught in your basic classes, that will also come under the jurisdiction of UPSC. They can ask a question. Or overall, they can ask in the mains level, what is the status of immunology in biotechnology? Why is it significant for India? What social problems can it solve? So this is a question which tries to link GS3 of science and tech to GS2 of health. So it is a convergence of health as well as governance, science and tech and health governance. Both these topics in curating a policy, when you club them together, will be useful for our preparation. So I am projecting this article in that context. There are a lot of articles about the vaccine development, even this particular article showcases the various prospects of immunology and also gives a detailed background about various innovations that happened. Just note them down. If you don't understand, fine. No need to memorize every detail. But broadly speaking, the importance of immunology research in higher education in India can be a very possible question, because benefits of biotechnology and applications of biotechnology, there are many questions appearing in this domain over the last few years. So this specific article you usually ignore unless we highlight it. So I am trying to bring it to your notice, the possible question, so you can frame this answer from the perspective of vaccine development, autoimmune research, organ donation, acceptance, technology therein, modern medication, and the overall idea of health as well-being. For this, you need to have a dedicated R&D. For that R&D, you need to have institutional capability, funding. You need to have skilled people continuing to work in this. To overcome that and also bring in gender inclusivity, you also have to address this so-called leaky pipe syndrome, where women, because of the usual patriarchal attitudes, drop out from higher research despite producing some phenomenal scientific literature. We have to address that problem. All these issues, when you combine and package them in the context of immunology, will become a comprehensive note in itself. And I wanted you to read through this article through this lens. So I hope the context is very clear from prelims level, from the mains level. Clear? Okay. Now, failure to meet climate targets doesn't make the COP irrelevant. We have the next 30th version of the Conference of Parties. Which conference? UNFCCC. What is the background? Okay, to the uninitiated who doesn't have a context, let me quickly give you a background. 1992, many countries, all the global nations, wanted to come together and convene under a umbrella to address the problem of climate change. And that conference, where some outcomes came out, is called UNFCCC. Okay? Every year there is an annual meeting to discuss how we deal with the problem of climate change. That is called the Conference of Parties. Clear? The 30th version of this meeting is going to happen in Egypt next month. But the problem right now, Brazil. It is going to happen in Brazil next month. The context of this is there are multiple problems that are existing right now. What are the multiple problems? The very first goal that this Conference of Parties set, that itself is almost unreachable. What is the target? We wanted to reduce the global average temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius. We wanted to contain that temperature rise by 2100. That seems unlikely now. Why? The developed countries, they are not doing anything. Most important stakeholder, US, has exited climate deal, the Paris climate deal. And the fundamental difference between COP5 and COP21, the fifth meeting and the 21st meeting, both these are extremely important. Why? COP5 is Kyoto Protocol. COP21 is the Paris climate deal. You might get a comparative question. Examine the nature of shift in the conference of parties COP5 and COP21. What is the nature of negotiations? You might get a question like this. I will not go back into the history of all that, it will take a long time, but I will tell you the fundamental difference. The fundamental difference is, in the fifth conference, when people came together to meet at Kyoto, all the countries, they agreed upon a very structured, responsibility driven mechanism where every stakeholder had a equitable responsibility to contribute to the climate change. As opposed to this fixed responsibility in Paris climate deal, because nobody was acting in a very responsible way, the whole climate justice debate is getting derailed because everybody is blaming each other. That's not working at all. So in 21, they came up with a concept called nationally determined contributions. Whatever you think you can do, please do it. That is the funda here. No force. And we have to submit our commitment updates every year. This happened in 2015, the so-called Paris climate deal. But what happened? Not much. Because if we have to really commit to that ideal of reducing our climate impact, the ill effects of our climate impact by 2100, we had to ensure that there is at least $100 billion for this climate transition. Who is going to give us that kind of money? That's a problem. And there is not much on the climate finance aspect. This concept of energy transition, what is this energy transition? Why is climate change happening? Fossil fuel burning. So, if you want to move away from fossil fuels and take up renewable energy, it requires a shift in how the technology exists right now and the entire ecosystem. For example, imagine you have a car today which is running on a petrol or a diesel engine. Just because the country wishes that we move away from the traditional fossil fuels towards renewable energy, do you think people can just like that afford a battery car? Okay, let's imagine we can afford it. How will you fuel it? What about the charging infrastructure? Right. Okay, let's say you got all the charging infrastructure also. Can you give the guarantee that this will last long enough? No. Okay, even if you give that guarantee, the whole point that we are moving away from fossil fuels is pollution. EVs is also producing pollution, right? How do we deal with that? India can't recycle lithium, the present technology. So it's like a conundrum, it's like a dilemma. We are moving away from one to another. So should we do it is not a question, we should. But how efficiently should we do it? That is the question mark. Clear? So amidst all this confusions, we are walking into the next deal. Here, what will be the agenda? Look at this. new collective quantified goal where developed nations during the previous summit promised to scale up climate finance commitments from 100 billion per year to 300 billion per year. They promised, but who is following up? So, you might get a question. You will be expected to recognize official jargon that will be taken from this COP meetings. You might get a question on this new collective quantified goal. What is it? They might ask. So, go back and note it down. What is the context of this new collective quantified goal? Here it is. Okay? From COP26 Glasgow, you won't have lot of updates, but the Glasgow summit is important. Okay? What happened in the Glasgow summit in 2021? We updated our commitments. What did I say? In 2015, every country was trying to fulfill a promise. Whatever they can, they will do it. We wanted to promise more. We upgraded in 2021. What is the upgrade? Go back and see the Panchamrit strategy versus the actual updates. This is also a possible prelims question. It can be asked in mains also. Clear? Now, going forward, what are the things that you need to focus on? CBAM. What is CBAM? Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. That is one more thing, and you should see this Baku to Belem roadmap to 1.3T. What they are essentially suggesting, these slogans, everything corresponds to the need for green finance. We are not having enough money to move away from the traditional fossil fuels towards a sustainable technology. All this terminology from current affairs can be asked in your prelims exam. So please note them down. Now coming to the next aspect, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. What is this? I have already explained this in detail in the past. So I'll quickly give a brief background. Imagine two countries, A, B. Historically, let's say this country A, some European country, which was built on the backdrop of imperialism. So they exploited the wealth of the imperial colonies. They built their own country. On the top of it, with the business as usual models, they have developed their own country as well. Okay. So they not only exploited, they polluted their own country, and they've also figured out mechanisms to dump the waste in third world countries like Africa, Asia, to clean their mess. This is the historical context. Now suddenly these same European countries thought that we should stop polluting this environment. Not just us, we should also stop them, because it might impact the entire globe. What did, what was this thought process doing when they were polluting? Fine, okay, let's not get into that. The problem commonly is, whether it is Europe or Asia, energy needs cannot be compromised because there is a lot of developmental agenda, poverty issues, developmental issues, all those require energy, access to electricity and fuel. Right. So we cannot compromise. This is the problem for Asian countries and the global south. What is this carbon border adjustment mechanism? Let's say from a country like India, which is one of the largest exporter of steel to the countries like UK or most European countries. Now they want to stop this imports and impose a tax, saying that this is green tax, some sort of a carbon tax, to ensure that your production processes are efficient, they don't release a lot of carbon. Now this is opposed by a lot of developing countries, because of course you can't just transform a steel plant into a green steel plant just like that overnight, right? It's not a food cart on the street. It will require a lot of investment, science and technology, skill, lot of things, so much investment, and you can't just bring in some sort of a tax as if it's acceptable. That's a problem. Even restrictive practices like this will come to the agenda in this discussion. So given these realities, the possibility of be moving in the direction of either of the existing problems, climate finance, newer technologies to reduce the pollution, or a realistic pathway to reach our intended target of reducing the average climate to 1.5 degrees, all of them look very bleak. Having said that, the author believes that we should not stop pursuing. Okay, that is what we can say. The takeaway for UPSC is you should know all the things that we discussed, both at a factual level as well as an analytical level. You can get a question both in prelims and mains. So please read this article from that context. The private sector problem, I think we have multiple times discussed this. I'll quickly sum up the issue here. What is GDP formula? C plus I plus G plus X minus M. If this sounds very complicated for any fresher who is here for the first time, I'll try to simplify it in a form of a story. Imagine that you have a pie or a chocolate cake or something like that. If there are only 10 people in that room and you want to divide that equally, and that cake is enough for 10 people, great. But if there are 100 people, how will you divide? Unless you can't apply the same principle of division, unless you grow the size of the cake. The endeavor or the pursuit of increasing the size of the cake is nothing but the growth process. Let's say we tried our best and increased the size of the cake. Now development is about giving equal or equitable to each person whatever is necessary, you give that share. That is the process of redistribution and development. Okay, so the question that we are talking about here is how do we grow the size of the cake? Because the component of, just like how when you are baking a cake, you require that maida, chocolate, butter, whatever goes into that cake, skill of the baker. All of this go into the making of a cake, right? The problem is one of the ingredient is just not enough. We want more of it. If you prepare a list of ingredients that will increase the size of the cake, there will be how much money that people are spending, how much money is coming into the country, how much are we using and exporting, and how much is the government giving. C plus I plus G plus X minus M. The problem is with respect to private sector investment I. Money is not flowing into the country because the world is undergoing a structural shift. What is the meaning of this structural shift? Technology is changing. The climate is changing. The whole business environment is changing. The business as usual approach, the old methods are undergoing a fundamental shift. And investors don't want to risk their money in times like this. Therefore, the world is seeing a massive shift. Clear? At this juncture, India is facing a challenge. We have a very young population where we have to invest on them, give them jobs, give them health, education, housing, everything. And yet, the businesses are not ready to do that. That is the agenda of this private sector problem. So, through a graphical interpretation, the analysis is all about what will happen if private sector won't participate. Simply put, growth will be reduced. Right? The size of the cake requires more ingredient. And if that ingredient is not added in enough quantity, how can you make it bigger? As simple as that. That is the background of this article. So, if you are aware of the discussions that we have had in the previous times, say more or less the same. How do we overcome this situation? Whatever money you are expecting from outside of the country, why not tap into the domestic resources? Common people like us don't want to invest in stock market because we don't believe in it. This concept is called the deepening of corporate markets, bond markets and share markets. The regulation aspect, SEBI for example, is going to help people. The financial industry can act as a catalyst to reduce the gap between Indians and the markets, because the problem is of financial literacy. All these things we have discussed previously. So you can club whatever we have discussed previously to this article. Clear? Okay, fine. The last article which is important for the day from prelims perspective. The concept of green crackers. Every Diwali you will see an article on the air quality of Delhi and the solutions proposed by the various scientific bodies to reduce that pollution. Green crackers is a concept that appeared in a similar context. CSIR and NEERI came up with this concept of green crackers, but the myth is they're completely pollution free. No, that's not the case. They're better than the older versions. So this article talks about some chemicals which are replaced the greener version, that is the less polluting version, and the more polluting version. In your prelims exam, you just have to identify both the chemicals, the ones which are clean and the ones which are not so clean. That is the takeaway from this article. Okay, so that's it for the day. We will again meet tomorrow. Okay, see you.